Okay. I don't know if I'll be able to see chat on here. I don't know. The guys will be on in 4 minutes. So, like I said, we're going to be discussing the stylometry and learning more about that and how they come to the conclusions that they wrote about in their book, Christ Before Jesus. So, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'm still just trying to make sure that I can be heard on YouTube and TikTok as well. All right, we just got a couple more minutes. Let's see. Oh, Can you hear me, Hannah? You can't hear me? You still can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? What? Huh? Um, Look in my red jacket in the pocket. Crap. Okay, so you can't hear me on TikTok. Uh, all right. Hey,
Hey.
we're actually already live. I'm trying to figure out why they can't hear me on TikTok.
Oh. Well, hello. We're already live.
Yeah,
I'm just taking a look. Matthew was letting me know what's going on here.
okay. So I can be heard on YouTube, but I can't be heard on TikTok. Darn it.
Ah.
It's the first time I've tried to. Oh, but they can hear you.
Oh. Well, some people got it, some people don't.
Let's
No idea.
see.
I don't even know how people are really able to stream to both. I have no idea.
I'm learning. We're already live, Matthew, just so you know.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
So
I'm trying
Well,
tone down all the cursing that you generally do.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why they can't hear me on TikTok, but they can hear you all, but not
Hmm.
me. So I
Well, I'm
don't
having
know.
technical issues too, so
Yeah.
I
It's just one of
sympathize.
those days. I think you just go ahead and just try again tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, I'm
So,
just gonna leave TikTok because
Oh,
I they can't hear me, so I might as well
permanently.
just shut that
permanently.
down.
Yeah. See ya, TikTok. Nice try, China.
So they'll just have to come over and watch on YouTube if they want to watch. Cause yeah, are you able to stream it on your TikTok?
I I no. I
Okay,
honestly have no idea how to
how that
do that.
works?
Yeah,
Okay,
So
especially on
I'm gonna
StreamYard.
what you
I'm
say,
gonna
Matthew?
give something a shot and see if I can join on my computer. So one of the technical issues I have is it doesn't support my browser.
Uh
And then I
huh.
was like, okay, well, I'll use my other browser, which is my backup, and it's which is recommended. And then it wouldn't open that browser. And then I tried to download it again, and it was going like 79 kilobytes a second.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay. Well,
We are
so
more of the we're more Excel spreadsheets, R Studio, that kind of thing. Not we're not the kind of um, IT savvy people that use the internet a lot.
um, I
Yeah.
understand. I'm not either. Obviously. Um, but so Matthew, were you going to be the one that was going to bring up the stylometry? Is that why you're? Is that
Not
what you're
anymore.
saying?
Oh, well, I guess I'm doing it over here.
Uh, okay, hang on. Let me give Firefox a shot. And but I know, that's my third backup browser.
Wait,
So
surely your first choice isn't what is it on Mac or is it Safari?
yeah, well, I use Safari for everything.
Oh,
Yeah. And see,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing why I can't do TikTok live, because I can't download the TikTok studio on
oh, the studio thing. Yeah.
because I have a Mac.
Mm.
So I was using
Right.
Restream. So I'm using Restream to try to do it, in which I know there's a way to do it with OBS, but I thought I had it down, Restream looked like it was working and it was. It just you could see me, but you couldn't hear me. but you could hear you. But I don't understand that. But I'm not going to worry about it. But
Yep.
if they want to watch it, they'll have to just come to YouTube to watch it.
There we go.
Hey.
Yeah. Make them come here. Yeah. Wait. People didn't hear me. But wait, did you already stop the TikTok?
I already stopped.
Oh, okay. I was like,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Well, people are not going to hear what I'm replying to. They're just going to be like, oh,
No,
Jaaron's
I already stopped it.
No, let me. Why? Okay.
Well, while you're trying to bring it up, for those who've never heard of it, what exactly is stylometry and how does it work with analyzing biblical texts?
Yeah. So while Matthew is fiddling around over there, so stylometry is a form of literary analysis, which takes a look at texts. It takes a look at the most frequently used words. It takes a look at strings of words. It can take a look at strings of characters, to see if there's a connection between one text and another. That would indicate like if something is being used as a source or being copied or something. As far as most frequently used words go, the most frequently used words that people use are going to be function words like I, you, and, the, but, that kind of stuff. And that is scientifically proven to be unique to each individual author. We all just use function words in a different way. It's kind of the fingerprint of the author, or author print, as we call it now. And so we can take a look at these author prints and find out, is this chapter written by the same person as the next chapter? And there are times where we find out, well, no, this chapter is not written by the same person as the very next chapter, and that's odd. But then there are other times where we're able to see exactly what scholars have said for years. And even things that scholars have started to say here recently, we're able to kind of provide that backbone as well. For instance, the Gospel of John is not written by the same person who wrote Revelation. But this is something that, Christians have been saying for a while now, or scholars have been saying for a while now. And so, we're able to kind of back that up. And there are people who say, hey, on some of your more eye-opening or surprising finds or discoveries, we disagree. Some people say, oh, you think that, for instance, First Thessalonians was not written by Paul. You say that and you make that claim, and I disagree. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. Then why is it that there's these other things in specific that we're able to see and confirm that people have been saying for years, and you agree with that? Like I said, like the Gospel of John and Revelation are not lined up. So, how'd that happen? So,
Right.
as far as that goes, it's not a buffet. Data science just spits it out and tells us this is the connection here, this is the connection here. And once we, are able to see the things that scholars have been saying for years, but also simultaneously saying the things that, are surprising, we have to take it all. We can't just say, oh, I like this one, but over here, nah, we're not gonna go with that. That's weird. I don't know what's that.
Okay. How's it going, Matthew?
Yeah, all right.
Can you hear me?
You get
We can hear
it
you.
out
Oh,
a little bit.
So I figured it out.
Okay. He keeps
Can't do anything
freezing.
about the freezing. Great. Okay, so I do have the demos ready though, unless Jaren wants to do it, just because mine is freezing, and then I can reconnect on my phone. That and then it won't freeze on my phone because it uses data instead of the local internet.
Okay.
So how are we doing?
Doing fine. If you have them, you can at least pull up the images there, and I can talk about them if need be.
I was going to actually run it. So if y'all
Okay.
want to watch it run, we can watch it run.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Hang on. Let me see if I can share my screen. So share screen.
Screen share may actually work even better. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Can you all see?
It's coming.
All right, good. So
Whoa.
the way this works, and the first thing we're going to do is run RStudio. So this is my desktop. You can see all my stuff, but so this is in R, the language, and then RStudio is kind of how you work within the R language. So we've already got it ready. Library. There we go. You set our working directory. The first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to look at our book. This is the user interface for Stylo. It's in English in this case. We're going to keep these the same, and then our preferred one is either simple. These are the formulas that you can use. So different formulas, they have different pros and cons. So like this is a consensus tree, a little higher level. These are your most frequent word settings. So for example, most word is more or less the frequency of the words in the text that you're looking at. So the first word in this list is going to be the most common word, and it's going to be something like the or it. We're looking at words. You can do any sizes of anything you want, but really if you get past like 3 or 4 in words, it's a good analysis. You're looking at different things when you look at that. And then you choose your output style, and we're going to increase the size of the graph a little bit. We're going to click OK, and it pumps it out here, but we're going to look at a bigger picture, and it is. So this is our book broken down via stylometric analysis. So actually, if you've read the book, you've probably seen this image before. Down here is one author, and down here is another author, and then this is the tiny little piece that was a little bit too small for it to analyze, so it's put it kind of in its own category. It says I can't really look at great confidence, so it's off on its own thing. This, though, is an exact perfect match for which chapters I wrote, and then right here, those right there, are the chapters that Jaaron wrote. And this was one of those I guess breakthrough moments for me, seeing it accurately determine which one of us wrote the chapters in this book. So I thought that was really fascinating. Because you do it on like the New Testament or somebody else wrote, and for all you know, maybe there's some kind of something you don't know going on there, or maybe somebody actually else wrote it. But this, we knew we wrote these chapters more or less, and then seeing it pump out perfect results was pretty fascinating. And of course, these are large sample sizes, and there are not very many of them to look at, but it was spot on. So now we're going to go to the one that's more or less the crux argument. So we're going to go back into RStudio. We're going to go to a loop. Have followed us for a while. You know that one of our main claims is that Marcion's gospel was the core of Luke, and then taken in the 140s or later, probably 150s, 160s, by what might be called the Proto-Orthodox or Proto-Catholic Church, and adapted into our modern version of the Gospel of Luke. And that person also wrote Acts. And Stylometry is actually able to look at that on this level. So again, we're going to run the exact same thing that you just saw, except this time the language is other because it's not in English. So, same most frequent words. We're doing either simple. Size is a little different because there's a few more text, so I just want to be able to see it all. Run it, and it comes up over there. But before we look at that, we're going to run back over here, and we're going to zoom out, and we see perfectly, again, a divide. So the green in this case is what's supposed to be Luke, and then red is supposed to be Acts, the authors.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, and this is not just a single chapter run. The reason I'm not doing that is because we like every time we do a demo, a little bit of a different perspective with little, different cuts and things like that. We've done single chapters. We've done 2 chapters at a time. The only one that's 1 chapter is 24 because it's, when we group by 4s, 24 was going to be lumped together with the rest of 20 through 23, and then that sample size from 21 through 23 is going to overweigh the data and the author print, so to speak, of the author of Luke 24. And so you see it, Luke 1 through 4, all with Acts. Luke 24 with Acts, but the bulk of Luke is by this
Are you able
separate
to
author
zoom
down
in?
here.
Are you able to zoom in just
That's
a little
really
bit more?
small.
Yes. So we'll go zoom in. Down here is our Luke author. So the core of Luke. So you see start from 5 all the
You
way
can
to
zoom in just a
23.
little bit more.
And look
A
at
little
the
bit more.
little
Just
bit
a little
more.
more. Yeah.
All right. So there we go. So we got Luke 5, and then through 12, through 16, 20, and then 21 through 23. This is that core of Luke that Marcion's school claimed was theirs, and that their author, maybe Paul, they claimed, or maybe Marcion is more likely, that is who would have written this one. And notice we have to travel far down this tree before we start to go up, and then connected with the broader Acts family here with this red is Luke 24 and also Luke 1 through 4. And so keep in mind, Marcion's gospel would have started at the end or so of chapter 4. So the majority of Luke 1 through 4 is that addition Catholic editor or proto-Catholic editor here. Acts 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, all of these Acts. And then the only part of Luke that shows, and then I did separate this again, Luke 24, because he here that wrote Acts at the end of Luke. And that's the way things were done. A lot of times when you were editing old texts or you were kind of adapting it to your school of thought or things like that, you would add on to the beginning the most and the end the most because that's the easiest. And then when you wrote your newer version, you might be able to sneak some things in there here and there, which there are definitely places in Luke that, the Marcionites did not have. But the bulk of it comes in that beginning and that end. And so it's really clear cut. When you zoom out here, that's a huge difference from the rest. And we've done, we have other kind of control texts, for example. So we might throw in the letters of Paul, or we might throw in stuff by Justin Martyr and see, what does a single author look like? And what you would see normally is that this division right here is distinct enough that it is beyond. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. We can kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right.
So Matt was kind of going a little bit in and out there. For the most part, I think that we got it all. But in a nutshell, he's just showing that, the style difference between the author of Acts and the beginning and end of Luke is different from the author of the bulk of Luke, roughly chapters 4 through 22, 4 through 23, somewhere in there. And that's when we start to see the material that is found within Marcion's gospel, known as Evangelion, which was published in about 144. There are multiple reconstructions of Marcion's gospel done by some different scholars, Matthias Klinghardt, Jason Badoon, Bob Price, I believe, has one as well. The point is, we take a look at the content of Marcion's gospel, known as Evangelion, again published in 144, and that material starts being used about midway through chapter 4 of Luke. It just shows us that the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts were definitely written in the 2nd century, and it would have to come after 144 because of that. So this is just being able to see it on a better scale there, and a better providing a foundation for that claim.
Right. So, what do you say to someone that says that that even though that is true, if that's true, they say if that's true, then how does that prove anything about Christ as far as whether he's because you all are mythicists, so how does that still prove that he's a myth?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, when people think, "Oh, hey, he's or these guys are they're doing," oh, how did Dan put it? Computer and no, math and computer software stuff.
Software stuff.
Yeah, software stuff. And that
The
somehow proves
Bible.
that Jesus didn't exist. Yeah. Anyways, so people tend to assume that we run stylometry and then it just spits out an answer that says Jesus didn't exist, and that's not at all how that works. All this does is it helps us by providing a better idea as to when to look at these texts, because it's not just a matter of how do you look at the text, it's a matter of when do you look at the text. If you assume that these things are first century, then that changes your perspective on how the religion itself comes to be, how the text, how the stories, the characters, how they develop and when they develop. But understanding that it's second century helps put things into a much better perspective, because all of a sudden you realize, okay, this is written by people who weren't actually eyewitnesses, who definitely weren't eyewitnesses, but even their parents wouldn't have been witnesses to this kind of stuff because they're writing so late. It also helps explain certain anachronisms. For instance, the earliest time that we get anybody who was definitively called a rabbi was about 70 with Rabbi Ben Zakkai. We don't have anyone who was definitively called a rabbi or anything during that first or second century prior to that. So why is it that, like, for instance, in the book of Matthew, why is it that uh, Matthew 23 has Jesus talking about rabbis as if they're all over the place and there's so many of them and everything? Well, that's because this is being written by people in the second century who are more familiar with second century concepts within Judaism, and they're putting these into the story. They're putting these things into the story. And so over time, it starts to make sense that this isn't really a historical story that's coming together. This is just you could call it historical fiction at best, because it does involve some historical people like Pilate or Herod or Caesar. But other than that, it just kind of falls all apart.
Mhm.
Not to mention, we have the Gospel of Matthew. It is placed between Evangeline and Luke as well. If you were to look up online, something called Matthean posteriority or Matthew posteriority. What it talks about is how Matthew could possibly be coming after the Gospel of Luke. But the proof for this is found in verses that are found in Luke, but they are verses that come from Evangeline. They're not specific to the Gospel of Luke. They're ones that would have also been found in Evangeline.
Yeah.
So in other words, Matthew does come after Luke.
Mhm.
It comes after, well, Evangeline, which you
Right.
could call Luke kind of, because it's eventually becomes Luke. But there's also a lot of evidence found in verses in the Gospel of Luke, specific to the Gospel of Luke, that show that it comes after Matthew. So Matthew actually fits in between two different versions, if you will, of Luke, Evangeline and
Mhm.
Luke.
Mhm.
And so it just kind of falls into place. It helps us
Mhm.
understand when we're supposed to be looking at what era, what century, and it really helps show us what we have,
Mhm.
and how it all came to be, the evolution of it. And then you realize that Evangeline's the first gospel to really be published and really disseminated into the public. And it was published by a man who didn't actually think Jesus was a human being. Marcion did not think Jesus was human.
Mhm.
So it begins not as a human being who eventually becomes deified with Jesus. Jesus doesn't start as a human being, a historical person who becomes deified. He's more of a deity that becomes historicized over time.
Yeah.
Eventually, he gets a birth story and a genealogy and stuff. Multiple genealogies, multiple birth stories that don't even line up. So it just kind of helps put things into perspective. So stylometry is not how we prove that Jesus didn't exist. Stylometry is just the way to help understand
Mhm.
how to look at it all.
The way to help to understand all the discrepancies and
Yeah,
things that,
yeah,
we've been told. over the years
Yep.
that
Just
aren't
helps
true.
put things in perspective. That's all it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I know one of the things you all talk about is I can't remember exactly. I have a horrible memory, but it has something to do with Jesus referring to when he went somewhere and he hadn't been there yet. Like, you
Oh
know what I'm
yeah.
talking about?
hmm
Yeah.
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 That's more evidence of Luke coming after Evangeline. It's Luke chapter 4, verse 23, where Jesus says, "Oh, I bet you want me to do miracles like I did back in Capernaum." But at that point in the story, he had never been to Capernaum, and he also
Mm,
hadn't done any miracles yet. So it just seems really weird. But that line is also found in Evangeline. It's just that in Evangeline, Jesus shows up in Capernaum from the get go. That's where he
mhm,
starts out. He descend, according to Tertullian, early church father writing in about 200. Marcion believed that Jesus descended out of heaven into Capernaum and started preaching and doing miracles. And then that line shows up later. And it makes
mhm,
sense there, but it
mhm.
doesn't make sense
In Luke.
in Luke.
Mhm.
So we've had people say, "Oh, that's just because Luke is a bad author." Okay. So Marcion somehow noticed that and fixed it and no one else cared? Like what? Like
Yeah.
it's no, it's silly. It's very clearly something that came
Luke,
after
yeah,
Marcion. Go ahead, Matthew.
yeah. Luke is a bad author, but you can trust him about the historical Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he
So
gets everything else right
Yeah,
except for that.
and
Yeah.
right. And we've also had people say, well, Mark still comes before, and every date Mark around the year 70. But using the logic of the more or less the mainstream, what they do is they put Mark as the first, and then Matthew and Luke come 10 to 20 years after Mark. But if you put Luke after 144, and then you use that same logic in reverse, or Mark
mm,
at the earliest being 120 to 130. And so there's really to cut it that any of the gospels or any of that material appeared before the second century, which I think is really
mm,
important because even if you wanted to just say, well, Luke, yeah, okay, we'll grant you that. Mark and like Jaren was saying, Matthew, and then also John is very clearly later. All the gospel material comes from that second century time period. If you wanted to put Mark as a little bit earlier.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that would just be absurd if Matthew, Luke, and John, because John, like Matthew mentioned, John comes definitely later because it assumes that you've already read portions of Luke. It even introduces like Bethany, the town of Bethany. It says, "Oh, this is where Mary and Martha are from," and it's like, who the hell is that? Like, it says it in a way that assumes that you've already read other gospels. Is bizarre.
Mhm,
But anyways, point is, um, the Gospel of John, Gospel of Luke, Gospel of Matthew, they have to be second century, post 144, post Evangeline. But if you want to put Mark in 70, what? That doesn't make any sense. You had to all of a sudden everybody starts writing gospels in 140s. What is that? Why? That's weird. Like there's a gospel in 70 and for like what is that, for 50 years? No, that'd be for 70 years. For
yeah.
70 years. For 70 years, no one writes any other text, and then all of a sudden everyone writes a text. That's just bizarre.
Mhm,
Not to mention Marcion, we call him that now, but his name back then was actually pronounced Markion with the hard
yeah.
C. It literally means little Mark. That's all that it means. And so the gospel according to Mark just happens to be from someone with the same name, I guess. Or that's the name that they eventually just kind of settled on because apparently, well, obviously people were referring to it by some particular title by the time that somebody writes it down.
Mhm,
Um, it's silly. Not to mention the first time anybody quotes from the Gospel of Mark is in the second century. So it's just it's no, Mark does not show up at 70. No,
right.
it's not a thing.
So do you all have any views on how this became myth to become history? You know, how people decided that this was actually history and not, just people writing books?
Matthew, if you want to try on that, and depending on your internet, I can hop in after.
Right. Well, I'll go ahead and say it because I'm pretty sure when this uploads, supposing it uploads, you'll have my, audio and it'll all make sense later. For everybody watching. But I really think, for me at least, I think ending of literature, of the author's intent. We go, from Marcion's much more allegorical seeming, mythical seeming thing, and people misunderstand what's going on. And it's kind of actually in the gospel arc is that literally no one understands Jesus, and everything Jesus says is allegorical, and it's just eventually misunderstood that he's actually just a there's a funny story. I think it's back in or so when they played War of the Worlds on the radio, and people listening to the radio, just tuning in for the first time, not having the radio on from the read, they turn it on and they actually think these events are happening, like aliens are invading other parts of the country and the world, and they need to. There was actually like a minor crisis there where people tell just from the content itself reality from fiction because of the medium it's construed through. So in that case, it was radio because that was what back like 1800 years ago or so. Hearing that same thing, you're hearing it read for the first time. You've never heard this story, and back then you don't have any way to prove that. So you get on fact, unless like if you just walk in at the middle of it, you're going to assume it's history. It sounds just enough, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are plenty of crazier Greek tales. So that's my take. I don't know about Jaaron.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point. With the War of the Worlds, who was that? Oh, was that Wells? Who was that was reading the War of the Worlds on the radio?
He wrote
Who
it.
was that?
So
Yeah, Orson Welles. Yeah. Oh, okay. He directed and narrated it, at least. Orson Welles. Yeah. So the point is, yeah, that kind of brings up another point where people say, "Oh, well, why didn't anybody ever prove or claim that Jesus didn't exist?" And it's like, well, first of all, if if no one existed, if Jesus didn't exist, then there's not going to be anybody in the first century that says, "Hey, Jesus doesn't exist." Like, well, that wouldn't make any sense. Now, in the later centuries, by the time that the name Jesus or the story of Jesus got to you, you probably didn't have much of a way to even really tell if Jesus could have existed. In fact, one of the books that a lot of times people bring up to talk about Jesus from Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews. It's been interpolated into by Eusebius in order to talk about like Jesus and the Christians and whatnot. But earlier on in that book, Antiquities of the Jews, in I believe it's book 1, chapter 15, it mentions Hercules. It talks about him. It talks about his father-in-law, his wife, his sons, his coworkers. Like, what? Like, and it's because of the fact that back then you just kind of heard a story and you just went, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, okay, cool. Like, I you don't really have a way to go back. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, only 3 to 5% of people can even read or write. If you hear about a story about some guy who existed 100 years ago,
Yeah.
what are you
Just
gonna
gonna go with
do?
it.
You're just
Yeah.
gonna go with it. You can because even if you could read or write and you took the time and the money and the energy to go out and find some kind of history book or something that talks about that era and you don't see him mentioned, what does that mean?
hmm
Does it mean that he didn't exist? Like, and today, plenty of Christians go, oh, well, they don't talk about him in the first century because he wasn't that popular. Okay. So back in the second century, when you're told about this Jesus, and then you go and, like I said, you take the time to find a history book that doesn't mention him, all the Christians have to say is the exact same thing they're saying now. Hey,
Yeah.
he wasn't that popular. It's like, oh, all right.
He's walking on water and
Yeah.
healing the sick and
Oh, yeah. He is doing all this, but he's just not that popular, whatever. But all that I'm trying to say here is that the arguments now could be the arguments then, and you wouldn't get anywhere. So of course there's not really going to be anybody who's sitting there like trying to refute it from a historical standpoint. The only thing that we can do now is we can take a look at the evidence that we have, and the knowledge that we have from contemporary sources, in order to find out what was life actually like I mentioned with the anachronisms of like the term rabbi. Like, this is how we can determine whether or not this story makes any sense. There's things like the census that was done in roughly 6 CE that doesn't make any sense if Jesus was born like a little bit before the first century. A little bit before the first century, like in, like, they say it's like between 6 and 4 BCE or so.
Mhm.
These are things that don't line up with history, that back then you might not be able to tell, but now we can, because we have access to so many different things,
Right.
just at the click of a mouse, that
Mhm.
people couldn't run across in their entire lifetime back then, even if they could read or write. So it's a very disingenuous kind of way of thinking about it. Like, oh, hey, why didn't anybody try to refute it? But yeah, I just kind of see it as, mythology. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to ask the question, why did they come up with Jesus? I don't know. Why did they come up with Hercules? Why did they come up
Right.
with Heracles? Why did they come up with Thor? Why does anybody come up with anything?
Yeah.
I mean, for a religion or just for fiction purposes, why do we come up with things that don't make sense? And we just
Mhm.
do. It's kind of the evolution of thought, and a lot of the claims of Jesus come from prior deities and religions. So
Yeah, for
it just kind
sure.
of goes together.
And I don't understand how nobody sees that. Nobody talks about that, and nobody pays attention to that or looks into that. I mean, because I did once I started deconstructing, and then
Mhm.
it's like, how can you refute the resemblance between Jesus and these previous deities? Like, how can you even refute that? And that's a big thing for me. That's a big part of my deconstruction. It's like the similarities between him and the writings that came before the
Oh, yeah.
Bible.
The
Uh,
most egregious one to me, by far, is the turning of water into wine. Dionysus does
mhm,
that multiple times. He's the god that's worshipped in just about that same area.
mhm.
He does it at parties. Why is Jesus doing that? Like, just pause for a moment. I'm going to have a rant here because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't do anything good. Okay, you could feed 5,000 people. You could feed 5,000 people. You can heal people even if they just touch the hem of your robe. You can heal people. You can heal people from afar, because some Roman guy comes up to you and he's like, "Hey, my sex slave. Oh, sorry. My slave is. Or he definitely was, by the way. But yeah, my slave is sick. Could you possibly heal him?" And he's like, "Done. It's already done." That is useful. That is. But showing up to a wedding and your mom comes up to you and it's like, "There's no wine. Do something about it, Jesus. I know you can. I've seen you turn the bathtub into wine. It's fucking gross. Oh, sorry. It's gross. But like, you you need to do something right now. You need to do something right now. And that doesn't do anything
Yeah,
for anyone. It
right.
literally, like, other than just make some people drunk. Like, it doesn't do anything. It's so silly. And it's very clearly something that's taken from Dionysus. It,
Yeah. Wasn't
it God
Dionysus the one where isn't that the one that was
at the
portrayed
At
at the
the Olympics?
Olympics?
Yeah, and then the
And
Christians
everybody
get
thought
all
it was
upset on
Jesus.
that too, and they're like, "Oh my god, what is this? This looks like Jesus." No shit. Like, yeah, it does. It kinda does.
But
There's a
he came
reason for it.
first. Jesus
God
looked like him.
himself God himself took thousands of years, planned this out perfectly, decided he was gonna send himself down to the desert, and goes down there and goes, "All right, the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm sure the angels were like, oh, you're going to tell them about penicillin, right? No. You're going to tell them about germ theory, right? No. You're going to tell them to stop, treating each other poorly for, being LGBT or,
Yeah.
or,
Tell them to release their
or having
slaves.
slaves or something. No. We're going to make my mom drunk. Like, what? That's so stupid. Such a waste of time. All right. Rant over. Sorry.
And Jaaron and I across this, it wasn't even just like Jesus that was like really copied for religions. Even in the 150s and 160s, Justin Martyr was like having to answer, why do all of your rituals look like they're taken from near? He admits it
Taken
and he
from.
says, yes, so mystery religions, mystery cults like Dionysus, like Serapis, others, because
Yeah.
he's talking specifically about the Lord's Supper, communion, and maybe baptism too. And he's like, yes, actually did do those before us. We admit that, but that's because Satan gave it to them. So in the second century, they're already aware that it literally is just copied, and his explanation is copied, but it's the other way around. They copied us up with it.
Yeah, to claim that the only reason that some other religion does the exact same thing that you do, but before you did it, to claim that it's because of Satan is just asinine. Like,
Yeah.
the guts, the absolute cojones on Justin Martyr to say, "Oh yeah, we do everything else like somebody else, but they're Satan." Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
crazy.
it when you look into it, it falls apart. It really does. To be honest, just talking with other people, it baffles me why anybody really tries so hard to defend against what really amounts to just a mystery cult that just got lucky.
Mhm.
Like, that's all that it is. It's a mystery cult that blended in with another religion that eventually blended in with another religion that had already been around for a while, the Jewish faith, and started taking some concepts there from them, and just got popular. The only real reason that it's around today is because Constantine decided in a political move to
Yeah.
legalize all religions, including
Mhm.
Christianity. And his mom was very sympathetic to Christianity, shows up over in Judea there for a little bit, or Roman Palestina, Jerusalem area, shows up and just says, "Oh, yep, there's the tomb of Jesus. Yep, found it." And just starts saying a whole bunch of crap. And so it just blows up and gets really popular. By the end of the 4th century, it's the official religion of Rome, and after that, it's lights out. They go around and start just destroying other religions. They destroy their own religion. They go in and if you're not the right type of Christian, you're a heretic.
Mhm. Oh,
And
yeah.
so they wiped them out. It's terrible. It's awful. And why
Mhm.
anybody would defend this and say, "Oh yeah, that like it's got a lot of history behind it." No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just like all the others. It's just legends. It's stories.
Mhm. And it's like, the clip that I shared, where you were talking from our previous interview, where you were talking about, if you know the truth, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to actually believe it, and you're going to change anything, or are you just going to just say, oh, well, whatever? And that's just crazy to me. But, people are so brainwashed and so, um, just I think it's just out of fear, mostly just out of fear, because they're afraid to even entertain anything different than what they've been taught all these years, and what everybody else is doing. Nobody wants to be ostracized or different. And what you all are doing is great, getting that information out there, because I don't think that the information is really refutable if you really pay attention, and if you really if you're not just looking through the Christian lens. I don't think that it can really be refuted.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we never really meant to be part of like the deconstruction community per se. That wasn't really our goal, if you will.
Right.
I mean, Hey, look, shout out to the deconstruction community there on TikTok. You guys are awesome. TikTok and YouTube now. You guys are absolutely awesome. I'm proud to be part of the community. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I would assume that Matthew would too. Um, but the thing is, it when we were writing this, we didn't think, oh hey, like people are going to pick this up and be like, I'm going to stop being a Christian now. We didn't write that in the book. We don't say in the book, oh hey, you shouldn't be a Christian. Like no.
Hmm.
In fact, I'd be fine with people being the earliest form of Christianity that we see. Pliny the Younger in 111 runs into Christians when they're in like their early mystery cult kind of stage, and they don't have any gospels yet. And what he talks about, the way he talks about them, after unfortunately torturing them to figure out what they believe, um, he mentions some stuff that's pretty good. He says, they swear by an oath not to commit crimes. They share food, they share money. If you ask them for money and they lend it to you, they won't pester you to get it back. These people, they're nice people. They take care of each
Yeah.
other and stuff. And that's beautiful. Just be the
Hmm.
best you can be in your society.
Hmm.
And they just believed that a Christ deity, not Jesus, but because they didn't have that story yet, but a Christ deity in specific was the reason for why they needed to do that, was their motivation. This Christ deity wanted them to be as good as possible.
Hmm.
And that's fine. Like, just do that. That's okay with
Right.
me.
Right.
So when people reach out to us and say, "Hey, I read your book and or stop by a
TikTok
TikTok
Live.
live, yeah, or something like
Hmm.
that, and or saw an interview here on Reclaiming My Life or on any other YouTube channel," they say, that was the last thing for me. Like I was thinking about leaving Christianity,
Hmm.
and but Jesus was just the last thing that I was really hoping was there. Like I was kind of going, I was on the fence, because I want to leave the whole thing, but what about Jesus? Like
Yeah.
maybe there's something to this Jesus because he seems so different from the rest of the text. He seems like this almost like hippie kind of
Yeah.
love everybody, progressive kind of but then there's some times that he doesn't sound that great. And ultimately, a lot of the Christians take what he says and just completely destroy it anyways. So,
Hmm.
I don't want to hold on to it. And then they read our book or something like that, and they go, seeing that just absolutely just allowed for me to let go. It allowed for me
Yeah.
to let go to Jesus and just let go of Jesus and just move on and
Hmm.
understand that this is just it's fiction, it's mythological, just like all the other religions back then. That's just how it goes, and you're just able to keep going, you know. And
Yeah.
I that's not necessarily what our intention was, but we're very, very happy that people are able um, to see our point, and can agree with us, um, and dig for the truth.
So how did you all decide to do the stylometry? How did you all get into this in the first place?
Well, we were looking for something more objective. So, one of our problems when we were just was everything you see is just subjective in terms of what I mean when he said this, or like the use of this verb in Paul's letter here differs from over here. So this may be Paul, this might not be. And it's really, uh, just subjective of like which scholar do you prefer, interpretation do you prefer? And we wanted something more objective that's we don't have an influence on the results, other people don't have the results, a way for the text to speak for themselves without the same level of interpretation. And so programs, we even talked about coding our own, but we didn't want some kind of black box software that nobody else can access. So we
Hmm.
went with this program that we demoed earlier called Stylo, and it's free, it's open source, it's been used in multiple peer-reviewed studies. It itself is peer-reviewed. It seemed like the perfect, thing, and it took a lot of time to collect all the texts and all that. But as you can see, it's it's so worth it. Like, we tested it with our own writings. It works on us. We tested it with known Greek authors like Aristotle, Plato, Justin Martyr, all these people. We on other You can see when you look at parts of the New Testament, the whole of the New Testament, it gives you a lens that is just so much more clear and much more objective than just relying on modern interpretations of ancient texts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That was how we got into it. We were taking a look at the Christology of Jesus. We assumed that Jesus was a historical person and just wanted to see, at what point and why and who, puts all these stories onto Jesus of claims of supernatural abilities and everything like that. And the more we dug into it, the more that we realized there's actually no evidence of this guy being historical to begin with.
so Sheldon wants to know if you two are familiar with the cold case Christianity guy.
Is that the guy who? Is that the guy who he's like, I used to be a detective, a homicide detective, or something like that? Is that what that is? I don't know why I went with the cold
Yeah,
case
yeah,
files.
that's that guy. No, I mean that's basically it. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
sure that's the guy. Um,
The trail went as cold as
Look,
a
I
some.
mean,
Anyways,
So who is he?
yeah, he. I
I
think.
think I just J. Warner Wallace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
He used to be a cold case detective,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's a Christian apologist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was always a Christian. Let's face it. But that being said,
Yeah, and
uh, he tries to use some kind of claim of like how you would take a look at like cold cases to determine whether or not they were accurate or something like that. It's silly because we don't have that kind of material for Jesus. But
Mm-hmm.
he just kind of. Anyways, what were we saying, Matthew?
I would not want him on my case. Well, that first off, I would not want him working on a case I cared about. Uh, um, no, but like Jaaron was saying, he was probably always. Um, but even more probably to the point, we joke all the time on like TikTok, make money. We would just find some way to fudge the data or something, like how to do it and stuff like that, and say, "Oh yeah, we found that the Gospels have to date to the Paul wrote all the letters," and that makes so much more money than telling people like, "No, this is all
Yeah.
just mythology." Like that's not a popular thing to be promoting.
Mm-hmm.
So you see this all the time when like former atheists or former whatever come and convert to Christian. Always they write a book that some 7-year-old like experience about heaven or something, and that just made so much money because
Yeah.
people will eat up anything they can with stuff. They don't want to hear actual science and stuff about it.
And that's true. I mean, you probably make more money being a pastor of a megachurch than.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't even really need that. I mean, like our ebook for our book that says that Jesus didn't exist and talks about like data science for it, or the data science for like how we get to all that. It's $3. The ebook is $3. Like if we wanted to make money, we would just say, "Oh, hey, Stylometry proves that the Bible is true," and then we'd make our book $20, and people would eat it up. But because good and well, the majority of people who buy the book aren't going to run Stylometry anyways.
Right.
So I mean, just do that. Do that, and like we're not trying to get rich off of a $3 book that we share most of the information on Reclaiming My Life podcast and on TikTok. You know, that ultimately disagrees with the majority of scholarship. We're not. How are we making money
Right.
off of that? It's
So you're not
silly.
getting rich, huh?
No. Every here I'm just going to say every time that somebody buys a $3 ebook, Jeff Bezos gets $1, I get $1, and Matthew gets $1. That's how that works. That is how that
Right.
works. That is the cut. It
Well, I bought the physical book
Oh,
and the
well,
audio
thank you,
book.
thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. So we're getting rich. No, see,
Yeah.
it, for the physical book, let's see. For the physical book, Matthew and I each share $2, and Jeff Bezos, I guess, gets the other 11. So I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's kind of how it goes. It's whatever. I for the audiobook, it's a little different. You actually have to. We actually don't get paid on the audiobook until you listen. Like you can get the audiobook, and we don't get anything. You
Oh,
actually
you
have
get
to
paid
listen
every
to the
time I
whole
listen?
thing. Well, no, not every time you listen. You just
Oh,
have to
okay. Just the
listen
first
to the whole
time.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But if you get it, because some people get it and be like, "Hey, I got the audiobook." I'm like, "Oh, that's great," and then we don't get anything because it's just
Oh,
it's how
they
it
just
works.
never.
Because yeah, they
Yeah.
just get it.
Dang, that
Which
sucks.
it's just stupid the way that Audible works. But whatever.
Yeah. Well, I listened to it twice to prepare
Oh,
for the first interview. Yeah, that's
hey,
why
there we
I
go.
asked. Like,
Yeah. So we did get. I think it's like I don't know $3 or $4 or something for somebody listening to it. So thank you, thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Um, so, what is the? Is there like anything specific that you can think of has been the biggest pushback from the religious community about this book?
Mm,
Nothing specific that stands out, like when you're doing your TikTok lives and whatnot, which
uh,
I enjoy, by the way.
People
no.
really
I see. Matthew, by the way,
Paul.
did you want to try your phone? Your phone might be good now.
Yeah,
I can.
go back to your
Yeah,
phone.
try try
It's
try the
going to be
try the
way
phone.
better.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
try that by far. But while he's
Just
switching,
a
I
minute.
can
You can go.
I can at least answer a little bit. So,
Yeah.
the biggest pushback from the religious community, I would say, is just oh man, I'm sure ultimately it's probably the same as the non-religious community. It's the lack of understanding of what stylometry is, how it works, how accurate it is,
Mhm.
and that a lot of that isn't necessarily too far off from being an accurate critique because um, uh, back just a decade ago, uh, it was thought that you needed a lot more information, a lot more data in order to actually
Mhm.
get accurate runs, which is why when stylometry was used on the New Testament, they would run entire books as opposed to chopping it into chapters. But it's only here recently, within the last like 3 years or so, that the scholars behind Stylo, the software that we use, actually says, "Oh, you actually don't need that much data. In order to get accurate runs, you only need about 700 words or so, and the New
Mhm.
Testament chapters, on average, are 696 words." So we were like, "Okay, well, there we go. We can run
Yeah.
it. We can chop it into chapters, and boom, we're done."
Mhm.
But some people are still hung up on the idea that you need more data. So they say, "Oh, stylometry is not going to get you that kind of result. That's ridiculous," that kind of thing. So from the religious side and the non-religious side, we that's probably the biggest piece of pushback that we get is just
Mhm.
a lack of
Yeah.
understanding as to developments recently as far as
Mhm.
telemetry goes.
And that's why when the demo that we just showed, we used 4 chapters at a time. So that's well beyond what people consider necessary, and it proves the exact same thing. And we did, when we were doing our test runs prior, we would do things like that. We do 1 chapter at a time, two, three. That one was 4. We did whole text. So when we make a claim, especially in the book, we are pretty confident about that claim because we're not going to just this is very easy to prove us wrong. All you got to do is just do the exact same thing we did and then be like, well, this is
Mhm.
where you went wrong here. But our stuff on Paul has been pretty controversial, like I was saying, because it's some people, I guess it's easy to say that Jesus may not have existed, but then Paul, we have letters with his name on it. Um, so that just seems to be alone enough evidence. But there's actually, when you look at the broader scope of evidence that people try to bring to the table for Jesus, when you actually look at it, there's less of that, even though it's not good, there's less of that than there is for Paul than there is for Jesus. So
Mhm.
I like to joke that like I am more convinced that Paul is not a real person than Jesus is not a real person. Just
Mhm.
which we got pushback on that, and I know some people are like, "Well, no, there are like 7 authentic letters or 6, or maybe 5." But no, none of them are authentic. So
Yeah. That's how it goes. Only bits and pieces of 4 of the epistles even show up as one author. And that one author definitely wouldn't be a first century Paul. So sorry. Next.
Well, they probably get so upset about Paul because most people follow Paul and not Jesus anyway. They think they're following Jesus, but they're following Paul. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because Paul actually like lays out, Paul, whatever, lays more of like the explanation to how to be a Christian, but that's the entire point. That's the entire point. Seneca, in the first century, during the 60s, comes out with. He's a writer. And he comes out with 124, 124 or 127, one of the two different letters that were all they were was just moral teachings. That's all it is. But it's in the style of letters. That was done. That was a thing. That was a trope, so to speak.
It's a genre. It's literally, if you've ever read Dracula by Bram Stoker, or watched the movie from like the 90s, or you've read or watched Pride and Prejudice, you know that those letters in there aren't by the characters. They're made up, but they sign it, they put their name at the bottom. Same with Harry Potter. So Sirius Black in Harry Potter signs his name at the end of a letter to Harry Potter. Doesn't mean he exists. That's literally a genre, and it has been for like 2,500 years or more, where you would write letters in the name of your fictional characters. And in some cases trying to convince people, but other cases you're telling part of the story. And if Marcion published that along with his gospel, maybe that's kind of part of the story he was telling is, his lineage back to Paul, or maybe he just, if you read the epistles, they have that travel aspect. And so you kind of see a narrative in there. And it's not because those are real aspects of real letters. That's because that's an intentional dropping in of narrative and realism to make it feel like they're real letters.
Yep. I mean, we have letters from Hercules. We have letters from his wife. We have letters from forest nymphs. Okay. Yeah. Like, it's just how people wrote back then. Like Matthew said, it's a genre. Okay. It doesn't really mean anything. And every time that anybody mentions having a letter from Paul, they mention having multiple. It's meant to be a collection. It's meant to be a collection. It's not meant to have, and Marcion publishes 10 letters of Paul or 10 letters attributed to Paul in his New Testament. And this would have been the first time that the vast majority of everybody has any clue who Paul even is. But this is in 144 along with his Gospel Evangeline, and he doesn't have any return mail. Like, how did you get 10 letters from Paul to churches? I guess you went to the churches, I guess, but you don't have anybody
copy of what one of those churches sent him, or things like that.
Yeah.
Never
really thought about that.
Yeah. And just going around just to collect them alone would take forever.
And that's all they found was, conveniently the ones that line up with the theology they wanted to teach. And there was a good quote by was it David Trobish, a scholar, and he says something along the lines of, you think these were really letters in a mailbox, but they were never in the mailbox. They were created wholesale, by these theologians at the time. So
that's the point. That's the entire point. Is it's teaching how to be a good Christian, how to run a church. And that's why so many people, it's easy to say, oh, well, you just follow Paul. It's because, well, Jesus didn't give a lot of information as to how to be a Christian. He did. He just kind of said, oh, love each other. The character in that story just kind of said, hey, be good for eternal reward. And it's like, well, if you have any other questions, then you're going to need to refer to these letters, because this is the only way that you're going to have any instruction on this. But the letters don't come from a particular person in the first century. They just don't.
Right.
So how do we access the Stylo? Is it just a link online?
I might be able to share my screen here for.
If you type in the letter R and then the word stylo, space stylo in Google, it'll take you to their GitHub repository and also the CRAN repository. So for those who aren't into like programming and coding and stuff, those are basically where the packages or the data is stored. Really, all you got to do though is download the R language, and you just go to the website, type in R coding language, go to the download, and then you type in R Studio, and you download R Studio, and you don't even have to deal with these repositories here. You can actually just download it through R Studio itself. So, and this gives you, and this is still a great page to go to, their GitHub, because it's got all of this like citation information, and it's got test kits in there and stuff like that. So they provide in that, I don't know if it's that specific
Oh,
one or
here's
if they've got a
contributor.
separate repository. They've got English, German, Polish, and another language, I think, maybe Latin or something. Maybe not Latin. I don't remember. But anyways, they have these test kits you can download and test the software without having to go through and download them yourselves. So not only did we download the program, we went through, there's something called the Perseus library, which is where you're going to find most of your texts. So you still have to
Mm-hmm.
download the text. They don't come packaged with Stylo. So once you get that though, you're able to go, and it's a learning curve, but it's not that hard. Honestly, I would say the hardest part is installing it. If you can get past the install and opening RStudio successfully,
Mm-hmm.
really just typing in those commands, really simple. Yeah. And we've had some people on TikTok, they will go and they'll do this, and they come back and say, yeah, I got pretty much identical test results and stuff like that. It is, if you did it the exact same way, you're going to get the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Recently on some forum that we follow, uh, the owner of the forum kind of gave us a hard time for our blurb on Amazon or something. Didn't even read the book, just hated either the cover or the blurb or something. And then we looked a few months later. It's been about a year since we were on there, and somebody else was basically like, I decided to follow up with this book, and it turns out when you run this, Paul didn't write anything, and the Gospels are like this, and basically everything we said. And so
Yeah.
I was like, yep, yeah.
And
And
the
then
owner was
the
like, "Oh,
owner of the
that's
blog,
good work."
yeah, good work, yeah.
Yeah. Now we had a conversation with some software developers a few weeks ago, and I
Mhm,
don't think that they would mind us at least showing like the website here, because they came up on our TikTok live here recently and talked to us about
Mm-hmm.
it. So they are working on, and this is a work in progress, but we're going to show it live right here on Reclaiming My Life. This is you heard it here first, folks. Diane with Reclaiming My Life has the scoop. So this is a website that is devoted entirely to creating dendrograms here for Stylometry. So it's a much more user-friendly kind of interface. It doesn't require you to download any software or anything, and it actually comes preloaded with like the New Testament documents. This is
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle. Obviously that's older. Perseus text. So this is from the Perseus library, which is like Tufts EDU. So you have all kinds of text. Here's Epistle of Barnabas. Here's some stuff from Clement of Alexandria. Euripides, that would be like the Bacchae. Bacchae. So he was like a playwright. Homer. So a ton of stuff, and of course the New Testament, like I mentioned here, you got different chapters of the New Testament, and you can select it, and then you can generate a dendrogram. So you can actually run the Stylometry here. I don't
Yeah.
know what it'll look like. Here, let me see if I can do it, because it's a work in progress. It's been a while since I've actually messed with it. I don't know if I've done enough to. Oh, okay, yeah. So it just automatically will start running the Stylometry for you without having to download stuff. It is still a work in progress. Like I said, they're still trying to flesh it out and everything, try to make it more robust and even allow for you to upload documents. But it is a pretty cool website here. This is found if again, it is still in beta mode. It is not at all something at the moment that is going to work as well as downloading Stylo and running it there within RStudio. But this website is words.austinandmatt.com. words.austinandmatt.com. And you can check it out, and you can kind of play around with it and whatnot if you like. But it's something that some software developers, they saw our video on a YouTube channel and said, hey,
Yeah.
we really like this kind of stuff, and they jumped into it and have been working on this. So it's really cool.
Nice. So is it Matt with 2 T's? Austin in the back?
Yes. Yeah. Words.austinandmatt.com. Yep.
Cool.
It's not me.
Yeah, it's not that, Matt. Yeah. Which is wild because like so Matt and I growing up, we were in a band together. And I'll let you guess what instrument he played, and I'll let you guess what I did.
And the band, Matt keyboard? No?
Not in the band.
Prior
to the band, though.
Yeah, prior to the band. We met when we were in we took piano recitals or piano lessons together. That's when we met, like at 10 and 11 or something, or 11 and 12 or something. But yeah, Matthew played guitar.
I was gonna say you played the guitar.
Oh, me?
He also played the guitar and the keyboard.
Every once in a while, yeah.
So you're the drummer?
No, I was actually
the vocalist.
I was the singer.
Oh,
yes.
you're the singer.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Okay.
So in the band, our bass player was called I don't know why I say called. His name is Austin.
Him a name.
Yeah, we gave him a name. Yeah, your name's Austin now, not Kevin anymore. Sorry. No, so his name is Austin. So whenever we got an email from Matt and Austin, we were like, what is this? It was just kind of strange, and it's weird talking like that in this weird. Like if I met somebody named Jaaron, which back in the day I actually did, and he was a lead singer of a band, and it was creepy. It was weird. It's really strange. But anyways, point is, they were some great guys, and I foresee a lot of great things coming from them. I think they have a podcast as well, where they're actually going to be interviewing Dr. Eater, who is behind Stylo. They're going to be interviewing him on their podcast here before too terribly long. I don't know when that is, but the thing is, they have this website here where they can, where they're working on this in order to kind of make stylometric analysis more user-friendly for most people.
Yeah, that's great. See, our Edgar says Jaaron is definitely a front man.
Oh gosh,
it's just translatable skills. You pick things up along the way, and it works out in other fields too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Before we started this project, Matthew and I we had a comedy show on TikTok and on Twitch.
You echoing a little bit. We're echoing. Can you hear it?
I can hear an echo.
Okay.
It went away.
Sorry. It was weird. That was weird.
Oh, okay. Nah, there we go. Well, we had also on that comedy show. Yeah, we had a comedy show on Twitch, and we had all kinds of technical difficulties, kind of like what just happened there. But it was a lot of fun. So it was interesting kind of transitioning from, coming out and making dumb jokes and then going to like, Jesus didn't exist. Let me tell you why. Like it was hard.
Yeah, but it's still funny because the sarcasm and yeah,
you gotta have some fun. Otherwise, I mean, you just want to go cry after talking on TikTok for too terribly long with people showing up and be like, "Hey, cowboy, you're going to hell." It's like it's terrible. You can only take that so much. Matthew doesn't do it online. He there for a few months. He was going live.
Not as often as Jaaron was. Yeah.
You didn't like it?
Well, I mean, timing wise, I don't have a lot of free time, and then also, I'm not as into arguing with people because it keeps me up. I would we do it at from 7 to 9 or something, and then I'd be up until about 2 o'clock, just reeling from the argument.
I get it.
I wonder if I am going to hell.
I mean, not that, but just it was rough, and then having to get up for work the next day, and then just continuing that process. It was pretty draining, and I'm sure I'll do it when we get our next book out. I'll probably try to do it a bit more, but I
get it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard just for me to watch. Like there's, and I'm not gonna say which one, but there's that one really popular deconstruction TikTok. Like I'll watch it sometimes, but sometimes it just gets way too intense, and I'm just like I can't keep
Stressful.
watching
Yeah.
this because it's just too much. Like it's too much swearing and cussing and arguing, and it's just too much. Why you look
Well,
like that?
now I
You know?
really want to know which one it is. Does it have a lot of panels or something? Is it a big panel on
Yeah,
there?
it's a big panel. It's very
I think it,
popular, and I
I
enjoy
think I know
it.
which one.
I enjoy the
Yeah.
knowledge,
Yeah.
but I just can't get past all of
Everyone
the
yelling at
just
each other.
Yeah.
yes. It causes me stress. Like it stresses me out. I can't do it. A little bit here and there is fine, but sometimes it just like they just go in. They just go
Yeah.
in on them, and I can't handle it. I just can't.
Yeah.
But when I watch Jaaron, it's more just the little snide remarks and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
and sometimes they don't even get it. Like they don't even
yeah,
get
yeah.
the
It just goes just in one ear, out the other. And those are some of the best, though. And
yeah.
what we do, or what we started to do, I don't know if Matthew even knows that we're doing it because we started doing it after he stopped showing up. But if someone just gets just way too off the rails and just isn't listening or anything like that, I'll be like, oh, hey, there's someone that you can talk to about all this, and everyone's like, oh, we know what's coming, and then they'll be like, who can I talk to? Give me the name, and then I'll play a sound. It's like, and his name is John Cena, and it just starts playing really loud, and then I'll just drop them, and I'm like that because that's when I reach that point, that is when I'm just like, okay, no,
Yeah.
I am pilot up here. I'm washing my hands, and I'm saying I have nothing to do with the death of this man.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
But
just
yeah, Matthew did mention though our next project.
yes.
We are working on running Stylometry on the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Old Testament, and it is interesting.
So you're doing all three of these in one book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. How soon? How close are you all to finishing up the book?
We've got the first draft on the Book of Mormon and the Quran, and we're working on drafting the Old Testament part. That's the
Okay.
biggest one of the three, and there's a lot going on in there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So is it
But
going to
then
come out
once,
this year or no?
Oh yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't wait.
Oh yeah. So the fun thing about the Quran, because people ask a lot, like, oh, well, did Muhammad exist? Is that what you're going to jump into, is whether or not he existed? And the short answer is no, we're not really going to jump into that, because the life and like actions of Jesus matter more to Christianity than the actual teachings. But with Muhammad, it's flipped. It's the teachings that matter a lot more than the life. In fact, they would want you to forget about the life. Certain aspects of the life is not going to bring up. But
Yes.
as far as the teachings go, they're like, oh yeah, let's jump into that. And we're finding that there at minimum 3 different authors found there in the Quran, with the bulk of the Quran, or not, I wouldn't say the bulk, but a good portion of it, maybe even close to half of it, being from almost like a Christian source material, where they're talking about characters from the Bible, whether it be New Testament or Old Testament. They're talking about a lot of characters there, and it is a pretty good split. Matthew, I've got this thing with the Quran and the notes. Am I allowed to pull that up?
Yeah, if you want to pull that up, I'm gonna have to go soon, but
Oh,
we
okay.
could go
Yeah,
over that real fast.
we'll pull this up
Yeah.
right before we hop off here. Let me see here, because
Yeah, this is another one of those special reveals.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. It's Diane time right now.
Yeah, I know your interview, which is crazy to me that you all were my very first interview, because with all the technicalities and everything, I'm not a technical person. I was so nervous to have you all be my very first interview. And then I've done about 14 more interviews since then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable. But yeah, it's just crazy that you all were
Well,
Right.
we're glad to be back.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And it has the most views, like by far
Oh,
more views than any other podcast I've uploaded, any other interview.
it's the cowboy hat. It just does it. I'm aware of the effect that it has on people. Yeah. So I share my screen
okay.
there.
Gotcha.
This right here. So
This is our
we're not going to
working
go.
document. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Working document here. So the things that have a green border around it, and then you have the yellow background here, and then down here is just mostly green. So these things are considered by scholars to be certain separations or certain distinctions within the Quran. So things with the green or the white background with the green border is usually thought to be written in Mecca, and then things with the yellow is generally thought to be written in Medina. And then finally, the dark green is Mecca, generally thought to be from Muslim scholars, but also we put it there if it in all green there if it has anything to do with Old Testament or New
Yes.
Testament, like biblical characters. And Matthew, you can
Yes.
go ahead and explain it a little bit there.
Yeah. So you notice on the left side of the screen that connection. So how far it's connected over there. Now scroll up. Look how far apart that is. So those
Yeah.
two. So when we add in controls of just Arabic writers from two different centuries apart from each other, though those distances right there are further apart than two different authors writing in different like regions and different centuries in Arabic.
Wow.
In Arabic,
So
yeah.
right. So what we see here is basically there are two authors, the Mecca and Medina, when they're just talking about like Islamic religious stuff. That's those two. And notice how they very, very much sort the way scholars sort them in
Yeah, they lump
stylo
together.
here. But then how far apart that stuff is from the when it has Old Testament, New stuff to the Old Testament and New Testament stuff, and it's almost perfect again. That is a huge gap, and that is like way centuries later type of gap. So it's either probably from like a translation or something, possibly Syriac, or maybe it's written, I don't know, literally like 100 or 200 years before Muhammad was preaching.
Yeah.
So that's a significant find right there. There's no reason that this shouldn't, all be together with the rest of it, because these are small names, just like they're not very frequent in there. There's plenty of data. We lumped surahs, which are like the chapters, together. If they got too small, like some of them up at the top, you can see like they're together. But if they were big enough, we let them stand on their own. Like 22 is plenty big, and there's little notes. But yeah, it's at least three authors. There's absolutely no way to get around the two authors. If you even wanted to say, well, Mecca and Medina, he's writing in different times, but that Old Testament, New Testament stuff, that is so far apart that it's got to be something drastic, another language that's influencing it. Like so it's a translation, or hundreds and hundreds of years apart, or something like that. So
At the very, very best, you can say Muhammad came up with some of it and stole the rest.
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah.
Or sourced the rest, I guess you could
source.
say that.
Yeah. If you didn't want to like
stole.
make it, judgmental. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait till that book comes out, and I hope y'all are going to come back again when it does.
Oh, absolutely.
I promise I'm going to buy the audio book and the physical book, because I have to listen
And then
read
listen
to understand.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you very much for having us back on. I guess the guest's so nice you had us twice. But we would be happy to come back again, because we always have a good time here on Reclaiming My Life.
Yeah.
I appreciate you all for coming back. And when I see your lives, I sometimes I want to jump on there, but I just don't feel like I really
come
have
on,
much
come
to
on.
offer.
Yeah, no. Come on in and put down the smackdown. If anything, you can at least like somewhat be an antagonist, and just antagonize them until we can John Cena them into oblivion.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, but I appreciate you all. Thank you so much, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll, get a bunch more views on this once uh, it's uploaded and everything. And well, it's already live. I'm trying to get me used to doing more lives too.
Mm,
I'd like to start going live on TikTok too, but we'll see. We'll see.
yeah.
But thank you all, and
Thank
I'll
you.
see you on TikTok.
Thanks.
All right.
All right. All right, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. I always have a good time with those guys. And I hope that you all will share this. The few of you all that came and viewed, I hope you'll share it. And I hope you learned something from it. I hope you got a lot out of it. And I hope that if there's any of you on here that are not subscribers, that you'll subscribe and that you'll like this video and that you'll just keep watching. Thank you all. I appreciate you.